It was a story that made global headlines. American missionaries Gracia and Martin Burnham were kidnapped by the Islamic extremist group Abai Sayyaf and held in the Filipino jungle for over a year. After surviving starvation, dysentery, primitive conditions, and 16 firefights between the terrorists and government troops, one last attack finally resulted in Gracia's rescue, but also Martin's death. 14 years later, Gracia joins us to talk about the spiritual lessons she learned in the jungle and how God has restored her shattered dreams. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
You know, I read your story in your book, In the Presence of My Enemies, and you suffered so much in the jungle that can breed resentment. I mean, obviously just being kidnapped is enough to make you a little resentful, possibly have a bad attitude. But then there was all these little indignities every day. They would sleep in a hammock, you would sleep in the floor. People would send you would actually get letters delivered to you with some care items, and they would steal the care items from you. You know, they would have more food than you did.
Yeah.
Like, how did you keep your heart? Like, you don't seem like a bitter person to me. So how did you keep your heart right?
I didn't keep my heart right. That's the whole point of the book. That's what I talk about every time I speak, is when things were bad. We were with New Tribes Mission, right? We were missionaries, had our act together, and suddenly the rug was pulled out from under us, and I saw what I really was when we had to suffer all that. And I saw the hatred. I hated those guys. I saw the questioning God, blaming Him for the situation I was in. There was nothing good in me, and it shocked me. And I asked Martin, where is the love, the joy, the peace? Where are those things that are supposed to characterize believers in Jesus? Because what I see is hatred and being hard to get along with, and depression, and more of the same. And Martin said, oh, love, joy, and peace are gifts from the Holy Spirit of God. Let's ask for them. Those aren't things you can make happen in your own heart. And we asked God to change us and put love in our hearts, and put forgiveness in our hearts, and put joy in our hearts. And when I asked God to do that, He started like doing it. It was amazing. He started just teaching me how to lean on Him. And so I didn't muster up anything in the jungle. I was at the bottom, but God can do anything, and He can change any heart, and He's the only one who can.
I love this moment where Martin says to you, in this jungle, I've seen hatred, bitterness, greed, covetousness, wrongdoing, and you're like, yeah, the Abu Sayyaf, you know? And then he said, no, I've seen that in me.
Yes. Martin said so many wise things. I had no idea what kind of guy I was married to. I knew he was a neat Christian, but never understood his Christ-likeness before that. And the way he would just trust God with our situation and encourage me, it was amazing. I got to know him in a pretty neat way too, just seeing who he really was.
He was your strength on so many days, keep telling you to keep going and that there was hope.
I think a lot of us women live with men like that, but we just don't see it because life just drags us along, and you know, they're home late again from work and they leave their stuff laying all around, and we start seeing the bad about them. And I think some of us live with really awesome godly men, and we just haven't seen it because the chips have never quite been down before. So that was kind of a neat thing that I got to see that about Martin.
I look at your story and you know, you survived 16 firefights, you guys survived starvation, so many different things. Martin had shrapnel in his back at one point, and go through that whole horrific year, you know, even seeing some of your hostages beheaded. And then on the 17th firefight, is over a year running in the jungle, Martin is killed.
Yeah.
How do you process that with God, or how have you?
You know, it's not what we were asking for. Our prayers started to change while we were in the jungle as time went on and as God changed our hearts. And they became more, God, you must have us here for a reason. Would you help us to learn our lesson well? And we both thought we would die in the jungle, but we were asking God that one of us could come home and raise the kids. And I think that last day, when one of us survived, I was really happy. It makes no sense, but we'd just been begging God that one of us could go home. And yeah, I thought we were both dead. We both did.
And that idea of one of you going home, that was really all about your kids, wasn't it?
It was. We didn't want our kids to be orphans. We had given our lives to go to the mission field, which I think is the best kept secret in the world. We loved New Tribes Mission. We love what they do. They work with people out in the middle of nowhere, where civilization's never gone, who won't be reached unless someone steps out of their comfort zone and goes and reaches them. So we were really happy to do that with our lives, but our children didn't sign on to that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And we hated for our kids to have to be orphans because of a choice we had made. And we asked the Lord, if it would please you, could one of us go home? And he answered that prayer. And I decided at the end, you know, I'm going to be grateful for what God's given me. I think by then, the fight was out of me. You know, I was such a fighter in the jungle and would plan the awful speeches I was going to make when I got out of there. Why didn't the government do something? You know, why are you guys so corrupt here? Or whatever my issue was that day. Mm-hmm. I think the fight was gone. I think I was ready to trust God with my life, maybe finally. Don't know if I answered that well.
No, that's a powerful thing. I was ready to trust God with my life, like whatever came. So you never got mad at him after you got back?
No.
You didn't have those
no,
fist moments in the sky?
Oh, no. Why God, me? Why me? That all happened in the jungle. And it's like God crushed me. What's that word? A contrite spirit, where God just keeps putting pressure on, but it's for a good result. And finally you're contrite. Finally you're letting go of your pride and I've got this and I'll do this on my own. Here in America, we're really good about doing things on our own, right? We have lovely homes and beautiful families and careers and a hairstylist, right? We're okay. And we'll handle things on our own, thank you. And it's like God brought me to the end of myself and taught me who He is. He's great and He's mighty and He can do anything. And no, when Martin died, there was no, oh God, why have you done this? It was totally settled in my mind.
You know, you said it surprised you that you were the one to survive and Martin was the one to die, because in your mind, you had kind of thought it would be the reverse, because you felt like you were weak and that he was strong. So he would be a better person to come back and, you know, raise your kids and be the speaker and run a ministry.
Yes.
What are your thoughts now?
Well, God's ways are not our ways. And, you know, often in Scripture it talks about how God doesn't choose the wise and the mighty. God uses the weak things to confound the wise. So I think when people hear our story, they say, wow, God did that. I didn't have the strength to live for a year in the jungle. God did that. I didn't have it in me to change my heart in the jungle and come out with love and forgiveness. God did that. And maybe I'm a huge object lesson that God can do amazing things with weakness.
We all are that.
We are weak.
We are all that. Yeah. You know, you're so honest about all of that in this book. And, you know, you talk about the forgiveness piece, because that is a big piece, and it's not something that's done all at once. And you actually had to go back and testify in the trial of some of the people who kidnapped you.
Yes.
Tell me about that journey of forgiveness and facing your kidnappers.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to do a good job of testifying against them, but I thought, what if I look at them and I lose it? You know, so I had people praying for me and got there, and God was gracious. Just like today, I was facing the judge. In a Philippine court, you don't face the accused. So I just picked her as my friend, and I told her my story that day. And by the time it was time to look at them and tell their names and what their job was with the Abu Sayyaf, and It's like God just gave me the grace to do that. But I looked at them with pity and with forgiveness, and it shocked me because I wanted the best for them. Isn't that a weird thing? I think when God does something in your heart, He does it well. And I'd been forgiving. You're right, forgiveness doesn't just happen. You do it over and over. And every time you miss your husband, you forgive again, and you forgive again. And when you practice something, it gets easier. So I think by the time I looked those guys in the eye, I really did have forgiveness in my heart. And, you know, I want to be a peacemaker. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. I want to spread peace around. I don't want to tell people that I'm bitter. And sometimes seeds of peace and love don't grow right away. Seeds take a while to germinate. But if we can be peacemakers, if we can spread peace and love and hope and give God the honor and the glory, a good harvest is going to grow from that.
And you actually have done that through your foundation, the Gracia and Martin Burnham Foundation,
Yeah.
working in the Philippines, continuing the work that you can't do in person anymore.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that foundation, surprisingly, has impacted some of your kidnappers in prison.
That's a good story. I got home to the U.S. and almost every sympathy card had money in it. And I didn't know what to do with that money. I didn't think it was for us somehow. And someone wise said, when people give you money, if you'll put it in the pot, start a foundation, you can give it to whatever you want to give it to. And that's what we started doing. And, you know, it's just me and my secretary running this crazy foundation, but we're at the $1 million mark. God's done that. He uses weak things. And we've been able to reach out to some of the guys who are in prison now for the rest of their lives, some of the Abu Sayyaf. And slowly, they're coming to know Jesus. You know, that's going to be a slow process too. But if you pray in faith believing, when you pray, God works. And I think God's got some good things in store for those men who meant to harm us, but God meant it for good. And that's just a great story, just a byline of what God did through this whole thing.
I think of that verse in the Bible, unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it can't bring forth fruit. And I think Martin was that seed. Your time of really dying to yourself in the jungle and so many of the things that you dreamed is that seed.
That's
and
a good
slowly it's bringing forth the fruit.
I love that.
God doesn't let any of our suffering go to waste.
I don't think He does. And all this could be happening and I wouldn't even know it. Like that could be happening in the Philippines and He wouldn't have let me know. But because He loves me and wants to do something awesome for Gracia, He's letting me know what's happening there. He's a good God and He loves doing good things for His children.
I love it. Your story is still being written. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your heart with us.
You're welcome.
We'll keep praying that, you know, Martin's death, that what you went through isn't in vain, that God's going to continue to bring a harvest of love, of peace, of righteousness, of
Thank
lives,
you.
people that know Him.
That's neat. I love that.
Thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
There's so much more that I haven't been able to share from these awesome books, In the Presence of My Enemies and To Fly Again. If you want to get your copy, the coordinates are right on the screen. Whatever you're going through, take some time and just ask God what He's doing, because He does love you and you are not alone. We can't just judge everything by how we feel. He wants to do something good even through the most evil of circumstances. If you need some encouragement today, give our prayer lines a call. We would love to pray with you and encourage you today. We'll be right back.